rooftop party in a city you've lived in for 2 years. String lights overhead, 40 people around you, a playlist someone curated specifically for this exact vibe. Your phone buzzes. Someone liked the photo you posted 20 minutes ago, from this exact spot, standing right where you're standing now. You look up from the screen and realize something strange. You don't actually know most of these people. You know their usernames. You know what they post. You could probably name their job titles before you could name their hometowns. And somewhere between the second drink and the third song, you start doing quiet math in your head. When was the last time you had a real conversation with a stranger, the unplanned kind, the kind that just happens because you were both standing in the same place at the same time? You can't remember one. Not this year. Maybe not last year either. Here's what this video is not about. This is not about you being addicted to your phone. This is not about you needing more willpower to put yourself out there. This is not about you being bad at making friends. This is about something that got quietly removed from your life, piece by piece, over the last several decades. Something you never chose to give up, and something almost nobody warned you was disappearing. For most of human history, there was a category of place that didn't exist for any particular purpose. Not home, not work. Somewhere in between, the diner, the corner store, the park bench, the library reading room, the barber shop. Places you went not because you had an appointment, but because you might run into someone. Places built for nothing except the accident of connection. You didn't need to be extroverted to use them. You didn't need a plan. You just needed to show up, and the room did the rest. And slowly, not through any single decision, not because of one villain, not because you personally failed at anything, those rooms started closing, getting more expensive, getting torn down, getting replaced by things that look similar but work completely differently. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what disappeared, why the loneliest people you know are often the most connected people on paper, and, more importantly, what it actually takes to build one of those rooms back. Because the good news is, the instinct never left. Only the infrastructure did. Take David, 41 years old, works in software, moved to remote work back when everyone did. For years, there was a diner 3 blocks from his old office. Nothing special, laminated menus, a coffee that was fine at best. But David went there enough that the staff knew his order. He had a nod-hello relationship with 2 or 3 other regulars. Nobody's best friend. Nobody he'd call in a crisis. Just people. Faces. A small, steady hum of being known in a low-stakes way. Then his commute disappeared. And so did the diner from his life. Not because it closed, but because he had no reason to walk past it anymore. He works from his kitchen table now. He's more productive than he's ever been. And somewhere in the last few years, he realized he hasn't made a single new friend since college. Not one. He didn't decide that. It just happened, the way water finds the lowest point without anyone telling it to. This isn't just a remote work story, either. Public health researchers have started putting a number on what this kind of disconnection actually costs. Stress-related absenteeism tied to isolation and disengagement is now estimated to cost U.S. employers around $154 billion a year. That's not a rounding error. That's an entire industry's worth of value, quietly leaking out of the economy because people don't have anywhere to go that makes them feel like they belong to something. Now zoom out from one person to one building. Sociologist Ryan Burge has written about watching his own small-town church, the kind of place that had been the cultural anchor of the community for generations, quietly close its doors. Not because of scandal, not because people stopped believing in anything. Just attendance thinned, upkeep costs didn't, and eventually the math stopped working. And churches like his are closing at a pace that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. Here's what's uncomfortable about that. A church isn't just a religious building. For a lot of towns, it was the last remaining room where people of different ages, different incomes, different politics sat in the same space on a regular schedule and were functionally a community. When that room closes, nothing automatically replaces it. The people don't relocate their sense of belonging somewhere else. They just don't have it anymore. You'd think that's the whole story. Connection quietly draining out of modern life with nothing rushing in to fill the gap. And for a long time, that was accurate. But something has started happening in the last couple of years that tells you the instinct for this never actually went anywhere. Run clubs, cold plunge social meetups, the kind wellness brands like Othership have built entire communities around. Niche membership clubs organized around oddly specific shared identities, book genres, hobbies, even specific music scenes. None of these existed in any meaningful way a decade ago. And now, they're some of the fastest-growing social phenomena in cities everywhere. People are paying money and rearranging their calendars to manufacture, on purpose, the exact thing that used to happen automatically for free, showing up somewhere regularly enough that you start recognizing faces. Think about how strange that actually is. Humans didn't need a subscription plan to bump into each other for most of history. Now, bumping into people is something you have to opt into, schedule, and sometimes pay a membership fee for. The demand for connection didn't go anywhere. What disappeared was the free, ambient infrastructure that used to deliver it without anyone trying. So here's the pattern so far. David lost a diner. A whole town lost a church. An entire economy is quietly bleeding value because people don't have anywhere to belong. And somewhere in between all of that, people started paying for run clubs just to feel the thing that used to be free. 3 completely different lives, one economic ripple effect, one missing ingredient in all of them. A place designed for absolutely nothing except the accident of being seen by the same people over and over without trying. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Not rhetorically. Actually think about it for a second. What was the last place in your life that worked like that? And when exactly did you stop going? Drop it in the comments. I read them. And honestly, the answers to that question say more than anything I could write for you. Okay, let's talk about why this happened and why it's a lot older and a lot more measurable than most people think. There's actually a name for what David, the church, and the run club crowd are all circling. Back in 1989, a sociologist named Ray Oldenburg gave it a term: the third place. Not your home, that's your first place. Not your job, that's your second. The third place is everything in between: the diner, the barbershop, the library, the corner store, the park bench. Places that exist for no functional reason except that people gather there casually, repeatedly, without an agenda. Oldenburg's whole argument was that these places share specific, almost boring features that make them work. They're free or cheap to enter, conversation is the main activity, regulars set the tone, and, critically, nobody needs an invitation. You just show up the way you'd show up to your own kitchen. And here's the part that might surprise you. This isn't a story that starts with smartphones. Political scientist Robert Putnam was already documenting a steady decline in American community participation back in 2000 in a book literally called Bowling Alone. His argument, in short, Americans were bowling more than ever, but joining fewer bowling leagues. The activity hadn't disappeared. The structure around it, the recurring, scheduled, communal version of it, had. Membership in bowling leagues, civic clubs, church groups, neighborhood associations, quietly falling for decades before anyone owned a single social media account. Putnam traced the decline back through generational turnover, suburban sprawl that made dropping by physically harder, and, yes, television, decades before anyone was worried about phones. The phone didn't start this pattern. It just showed up in time to accelerate something that was already sliding, using a technology built specifically to keep you looking at it instead of the room around you. Now, I want to be fair here because there's a reasonable version of the counterargument, and it deserves real airtime instead of strawman. A lot of people will tell you, this is really about screen time. Cut your phone use, put in the effort, go outside more, and the loneliness fixes itself. And that's not wrong exactly. Screen habits and personal effort genuinely do move the needle for a lot of people. If you're doom scrolling 4 hours a night, putting the phone down will probably help. But here's what that explanation can't fully account for. Researchers analyzing census tract data found a sharp decline in third-place availability between 2019 and 2021, before you even get to the question of what any individual person was doing with their phone. And a national survey from the Survey Center on American Life found that half of Americans say they never or rarely visited a park in the past year, with only about 15% going weekly. That's not a willpower problem. That's a supply problem. You can put your phone in a drawer every single day, and it won't put a library branch back on the corner that got quietly scaled down or reopen a rec center that got sold off years ago. And the shortage isn't distributed evenly, which is the part that should really bother you. That same census tract research found third places disappearing fastest in majority black neighborhoods, in lower income areas, in rural communities, the exact places where people had the least ability to just drive somewhere else or pay for a private substitute. This isn't random bad luck spread evenly across society. It has a shape. It lands hardest on the people with the fewest alternatives. And if you think this is a uniquely American problem, look at Japan. In 2021, Japan became only the second country in the world, after the United Kingdom, to appoint a government minister specifically dedicated to loneliness, after a pandemic-era spike in suicides, especially among young women, made the cost of disconnection impossible to ignore politically. Japan has a specific word, Kodokushi, for dying alone and being discovered days or weeks later. The country's response has been almost entirely structural, not motivational. Community cafeterias, conversation cafes, subsidized gathering spaces, and a 2024 national law directing every local government to work toward its own isolation prevention plan. Nobody in Tokyo is telling lonely people to simply try harder to make friends. The policy response is build a room and see if people come. They usually do. Zoom back out. And the pattern gets almost eerie in how consistent it is across completely different cultures. A 2024 Pew Research survey found that about 1 in 6 American adults feel lonely or isolated most or all of the time, and nearly 4 in 10 say they sometimes feel that way. Together, while over half the country living with some regular version of the same ache, and the rate's highest among people with less formal education, lower incomes, and no spouse or partner. That's precisely the gap Putnam was describing a quarter century ago, just measured on a different generation in a different country entirely. So the honest version of this isn't screens made us lonely. It's closer to the physical scaffolding for casual connection had already been quietly stripped out of modern life for 40 years, unevenly, according to who could least afford to lose it, and then the phone arrived and made the absence a lot easier not to notice. Go back to that rooftop. 40 people, string lights, your phone buzzing with a like on a photo of the exact spot you're standing in. You weren't broken up there. You want to know what was actually wrong with that scene? It wasn't designed to produce connection. It was designed to produce content. Everyone in that room had shown up once, for one night, with no expectation of ever seeing each other again. No regulars. No repetition. No low-stakes reason to come back next Tuesday. A third place isn't just a place with people in it. It's a place you return to again and again until familiarity does the work that effort can't. That's the actual difference between a rooftop party and a diner where the staff knows your order. One is a room. The other is infrastructure. Think about what infrastructure actually means for a second. Nobody thinks about the pipes under their street until the water stops running. Nobody thinks about the third place that used to structure their week until it's gone, and they're standing at a party doing math about the last time they talked to a stranger. That's what makes this particular kind of loss so easy to miss while it's happening. It doesn't announce itself. There's no single dramatic day where the diner closes and a siren goes off. It's just, one year you go 3 times instead of 30. The next year once, then not at all. And by the time you notice the absence, it doesn't feel like something was taken from you. It feels like a personal failure to keep up a habit you can't quite remember choosing to drop. That's the trick loneliness plays on you. It disguises a structural loss as a character flaw. And here's where the story bends somewhere hopeful, because the same generation that grew up with the least third-place infrastructure in modern memory, fewer funded libraries, fewer community centers open on a regular schedule, fewer churches standing, more of their social life mediated through a feed, is the one now quietly rebuilding it by hand on purpose. The run clubs, the cold plunge mornings, the oddly specific membership communities built around one shared interest. None of it is an accident, and none of it is nostalgia. It's 40 years of missing infrastructure finally getting noticed, and a generation deciding to build a replacement themselves instead of waiting for someone else to reopen the library. Japan's answer to this was a ministry and a law. Yours doesn't have to be that big. It just has to be regular. That's the real twist in all of this. The instinct that makes you show up to the same running group every Saturday morning in the cold before your coffee. That's the exact same instinct that used to just get satisfied for free at the corner diner. It never left. It got starved of a place to live, and now it's finding new ones, one Saturday morning group at a time. You don't need to feel more grateful for your 40 rooftop acquaintances. You need one place you go back to on a regular schedule, with low enough stakes that showing up doesn't require an occasion. That's it. That's the whole fix, structurally. Not more effort, not more extroversion, just repetition in the same physical space, with people who'll notice if you stop showing up. So here's what's actually true if you strip away the noise. 1. Your loneliness probably isn't a personal failing. More often, it's a missing infrastructure problem, a room that used to exist in your life and quietly stopped existing through no decision you made. You didn't fail to keep up a habit. The habit lost its home. 2. This didn't start with your phone. It started decades earlier, with community spaces losing funding, churches closing their doors, and third places disappearing fastest exactly where people could least afford to lose them. Your phone just arrived in time to make the emptiness easier to ignore and easier to mistake for a personal problem instead of a structural one. 3. The fix isn't dramatic and it isn't fast. It's not a personality transplant, and it's not a New Year's resolution to put yourself out there more. It's one ordinary room, returned on a regular schedule, until the people in it start to notice when you're missing. That's the whole mechanism. It's unglamorous. Nobody's going to make a viral video about attending the same Tuesday night trivia league for 8 months straight. It's also the only thing that's ever actually worked in every culture that's ever studied this seriously, from Putnam's bowling leagues to Japan's conversation cafes to whatever your city's version of a run club turns out to be. So here's the question I'd genuinely like you to sit with. And I mean actually sit with it, not just nod along. What's one place, a class, a run club, a coffee shop, a weekly game night that you could turn into your third place starting this month? Not forever, just regularly enough that it starts to count. Regularly enough that if you didn't show up one week, somebody would actually notice. Tell me in the comments what that place is for you, or what it used to be before it quietly disappeared. And if this helped you name something you've been feeling but couldn't quite explain, that's the whole point of this channel. See you in the next one.